If you've watched any portion of the LSA supercharger install on the Silverado that I've done over the last month or so, this is the video that you're going to want to watch, because today we're going wide open throttle for the very first time. I finished up the blower install probably about a week ago. It's an LSA kit that I got from Boost District, so check those guys out. And I finished up most of the partial throttle tuning, and I've done pulls with probably, like, without shifting in, say, second gear, I'll go like 80% throttle, just to try to get the tune kind of roughed in and get an idea of the trends that we're going to need to do to modify the VE table in the higher boost and higher RPM regions. But I haven't gone full throttle, especially from a dead stop, because the truck wheel hopped so badly I was worried something would break. And number two, I wanted to get the servo in the transmission before we let it shift through the gears. So in the last video, I actually put the caltracs on. Those are going to stop the wheel hop and also improve traction, so kind of like a win-win there. And I also installed the Corvette servo in the 4L60, which is going to improve the 1-2 and the 2-3 shift. But I also learned that when I had the servo cover off, someone has been inside the transmission before. It's probably been rebuilt. Everything looks really clean. It's freshly painted, and there's a shift kit inside there. So hopefully the 4L60 will last a little bit longer than I was originally thinking it might. We, of course, are going to be doing a 4L80 conversion very shortly, but we got to do LS Fest first, as well as some wide open throttle pulls, some dyno testing, and a few other odds and ends. So for now, the 4L60 is going to stay, and I actually feel just a little bit better about it being in there than I did before. So like I said, today the main goal is to do some wide open throttle pulls, do some final tuning, probably a couple burnouts if everything goes how I hope it will. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk to you guys about belts on a supercharged application, because I actually learned something that I did not know, which is probably going to be helpful if you have a supercharged, like, anything. So as you know, a serpentine belt will stretch. And when I first put this thing together, it had the standard basic part store Gates belt on it. And when I put it on, basically, I maxed out the tensioner kind of like that, and I put the absolute shortest belt I possibly could fit on. When I first fired up the engine, almost instantly the belt kind of stretched just a little bit to maybe somewhere kind of in that position there. But after driving the truck for probably 35 to 40 miles doing some tuning, without, not going really aggressive, the belt stretched basically to the point where the tensioner was almost maxed out, which is not what you want to have, because if the tensioner maxes out, the belt won't be tight as it should be, and you'll have belt slip and all kinds of other problems. So I did a little bit of reading, and the next best belt is like the Gates Green HD belt, but they actually don't make one in the specific length that I needed. So I also found a Gates RPM belt, which is designed specifically for supercharged and high performance applications, something where there's a lot more drag on the serpentine drive setup. So I ordered a Gates RPM belt, and actually the same exact length as I had before. It was a 104 1/4. So all you got to do is you take the same part number that you had before and just add RPM onto the end. And they actually make quite a lot more RPM series belts. They have more different variety of lengths and stuff than they do for the Green HD belt. So I grabbed one, I put it on, and this is kind of where the tensioner sits. So you can see that little black line way down there, full focus. So this is where it's riding now. And this is where the tensioner is fully maxed out. So we're probably, I'd say, like 60 to 80% of the total available travel. Now, when I ordered this belt, I'll be honest, I didn't do much research about the Gates RPM belt. I knew that the one thing that set them apart from the other belts is that they won't stretch. So I was like, that's perfect. But according to Gates, you're only supposed to have your tensioner running at about, I think they said like 40 to 60% travel, because the belts don't stretch. They'll actually snap if something like maxes out. So I've actually ran this belt. I drove around last night after I put it on for probably like 45 miles of just easy driving, just to try to see if it would stretch, which it didn't. Like, literally, the tensioner has not moved since I've installed it, which is great. And the other kind of saving grace, I think, is because these truck tensioners don't put a lot of tension on the belt, it's still fairly, I don't know if I'd say loose or not, but there's still a fair amount of free tension. I don't know what you want to say, but it's not like strung tight like a guitar string. So I hope and I think that we're not going to have any problems with the belt snapping. But if we do, it's simply because the belt I put on is too short. But I didn't know that before I ordered it, so yeah, if you want to put an HD belt on a supercharged anything, definitely make sure that it's sitting in the right spot of your tensioner, you know, somewhere right in the middle. I will say in terms of the tensioner and idler, I am considering buying the Boost District HD tensioner kit that will still work with a 6-rib drive. Basically, it puts the tensioner on the cylinder head and it adds an idler pulley down here to get just a little more belt wrap on the blower, or not the blower, the crank pulley. But anyway, I haven't had any belt slip issues so far. I've actually ran the RPM belt for, like I said, probably 40 miles yesterday. So anyway, long story short, let's go for a rip. So just as we drive out to the spot here, I figured I'd kind of go over the overall setup of this thing because it's been a while since you guys have probably seen what we've done. Basically, it's a stock bottom end 4.8. It's got opened up ring gap. It has a 220, 224 at 50 cam. We've got beehive valve springs in there, long tube headers, 1 3/4 primary, dual 3-inch exhaust into a single 4-inch. We have a Summit Pro LS. I think it's a 3000 style torque converter in here. Of course, now the Corvette servo. We got 430 gears. It is 2-wheel drive currently, or 4-wheel drive in 2-wheel drive, but we are going to be doing an all-wheel drive conversion. I'm going to start that tomorrow, actually. So that's basically the setup. Of course, it's got ARP head studs, head bolts rather, MLS heads, gasket. So it should be a pretty strong bottom end. Naturally aspirated, made 275 at the wheels, which I was kind of bummed out about, but that's the basic setup. We've got the LSA blower on there now. Based on what I've seen, it should be making somewhere around 14 pounds of boost under full rip, so let's see what she's got. So she spun pretty easy off the line. Feels pretty good. I'd say with the amount of timing in it that I have, which is not a lot, it definitely could pick up more. But, you know, being that we only have 91 octane fuel here, I'm a little bit limited in terms of how much timing I can put into it. I do want to do an E85 conversion, but that's like a whole other thing for a whole other day. So anyway, first rip, definitely on the rich side. I noticed that, and feels pretty good. Maybe not quite as much as what I was expecting, but pretty good. So this time I'll just do kind of a roll on from like, let's kind of go 40 and we'll just nail it once we get a good clear spot here. Nothing wrong with that at all. Yeah, IAT's got a little warm on that one, but they drop pretty quick. I think I saw 120 right at the end of the pull, and it's already down to like 106. Yeah. And those IATs, that's just one reason why I want to run E85, because I can run so much more timing and not have to worry about detonation, where, you know, once you get the IATs up there on gasoline, and we only have 91 here, that's why I'm running low timing to keep it out of knock. So let's see, yep, back down to 91 in just a minute. This is addictive, like that torque for a 4.8, like this is pretty spicy. I'm gonna try not to do full throttle just because it's spun, but it spins at like half throttle. That's so cool. Definitely loves RPM. Oh man, I love it. I really do. All right, so we just got back to the shop and I actually took probably a half hour, 45 minutes, just kind of went through everything on the tune to kind of get a little bit closer. I'll show you all that in just a second. As far as the truck goes, I think it performed, from a mechanical standpoint, it performed flawlessly. Like, I checked out the belt after making, I think like 5 or 6 good solid rips, and the tensioner is still kind of where we left it. So maybe the belt stretched just like a teeny tiny bit, but for the most part, that RPM belt is hanging in there and doing exactly what I want it to do. So awesome upgrade there. Traction, we're definitely going to need some help when we're trying to get this thing off the line. I think a little bit later I'll do some draggy runs to see what the 0 to 60 and the 1/8 mile are, but it definitely spins right off the line, so that's even one more reason why I'm more excited about doing the all-wheel drive conversion. So real quick, let me show you some of the tune stuff and we'll hit the road again. At the data log here, you can see the yellow line, that's throttle position. We whacked the throttle at 47, 48 miles an hour, and then we continued on to a little bit more than the posted speed limit. The fueling, that's kind of the first thing I'm looking at. This white line down here, that's commanded fuel, equivalence ratio of 0.79. And the the yellow one, that's the actual as measured by the wideband that's pumped into the HP Tuner's brick. So as you can see, they're fairly close, but it's about 10% off. I actually recorded that with a histogram, so I know exactly what cell is lean or rich, and so I can make adjustments to the VE table accordingly. The next thing I was looking at is IATs, which, you know, on a blower car, you got to kind of keep an eye on that stuff. This blue line here is IAT. Started off at 95 because we actually just did a pull. We did this pull before it, but anyway, we're starting off at 95 degrees, and by the end of the pull, we're at 151. So the IATs, they do climb up, but that's kind of what you expect with an LSA blower. Things are going to get hot and the brick inside is only able to remove so much heat. But if you look at the IATs immediately after the pull, they drop down fairly rapidly, and within, I didn't look at the timestamp, but within about a minute or two, the IATs are back down to about 20 degrees over ambient, and that's kind of where they want to run. I actually did adjust in there how much timing is pulled for every degree of temperature increase on the IAT. It was fairly aggressive. At first, it would pull like 6 degrees of timing at like 130 degrees of IAT. So I adjusted that a little bit. I talked to my tuner on that when he said, don't get really aggressive on the timing retard until you get to about 170 degrees inlet air temp. And he said by the time we're at 200 degrees IAT, which we haven't seen, you want to have probably 10 or 12 degrees pulled out. Anyway, on my setup right now, we're only on pump 91 gas. I probably mentioned that before. So my commanded timing is right around 10 degrees. But I really do want to add some E85 in the future so we can run a lot more timing and have cooler IATs, because the fuel actually has a little bit of a cooling effect. But anyway, those are just a couple of things that I'm looking for. There's a whole lot more to tuning than what I just showed you, but I'll get my new tune loaded up. We'll go for another drive and do some draggy 0 to 60 and 1/8 mile runs. So the bad thing about this is, though, I'm already like thinking of what to do next, like whether I put in a bigger engine. You know, one thing Matt, my tuner, mentioned to me is I probably should put some stiffer valve springs in just so I can rev this thing even higher. Right now, I'd have to check the log, but I think it shifts at like 65 or 6,700. But being such a small motor, this thing will probably continue to make power up high. I mean, I don't know, there's all kinds of different stuff you can do, but I'm kind of at a loss for words just how much torque this thing makes out. I feel like this is like the perfect combination right here between the gearing and the chassis and the, I was gonna say transmission, but the torque converter is kind of set up pretty good. So for as much as it spins in 2-wheel drive, like when this thing is all-wheel drive, this thing is gonna hook and book. Yeah, I like it. Spins too easy. promising. So I'm just sitting here kind of thinking about this 0 to 60 thing, because it is a challenge to try to get this truck to put down the power. It spins like instantly. I looked at a log just now, and with like, no kidding, 15% throttle, like if you whack it quick enough, 15% is going to start to spin the wheel. So that's not very conducive to getting a good 0 to 60 time. But if you remember, one of my goals was to make this truck nearly as quick as the ugly truck was on low boost. I actually haven't tested the ugly truck on high boost yet, but actually no, that's a lie, because when we went to the drag strip it had 14 pounds of boost. But anyway, the 0 to 60 time that we just ran was actually, the first one was my best, 6.40 seconds to 60, and that's with spinning. I got a pretty decent launch, but the ugly truck, that did 6.15, so that's like a quarter of a second slower, and we could do better with this one. So the other thing I was going to look at real quick is the 8th mile. This truck did it just now, 933 at 80 miles an hour. The ugly truck at a track on 14 pounds or whatever it was, 13 pounds. That was before the good converter in the ugly truck, by the way. That one did the 8th mile at 867 at 88 miles an hour. So I would say we're actually like, we're within spitting distance to get this truck as quick as the ugly truck. I think if I could actually get a decent launch, kind of come up against the torque converter, and then, you know, launch without spinning, I think we could do it. So I'm actually going to be starting my all-wheel drive conversion tomorrow. I probably said that 4 times already in this video, but we're starting the all-wheel drive conversion. I've had this stuff since like September. So before we do that though, I do owe you guys some burnout. So I'm going to go back to the house, bolt some junky tires on the back of this. We're going to let her eat. So with that, the LSA install is pretty much done. I do have to spend a little more time with the tune to get things kind of polished, you know, to be finished, but for the most part I can go out and drive this thing and not have to worry about anything leaning out or blowing itself up. And I love this LSA. Like, it's a completely different animal from a turbo truck. Like the big block, when I roll into it, you'll take off just a little bit, and then as soon as the turbo comes online, it'll just blitz the tires off. But this one is totally the opposite. It's like a light switch, like instant torque, instant response, even on a little baby 4.8. I think that's the thing that impresses me the most about this whole thing, is how much torque and response that little 4.8 has with the help of the LSA supercharger. The only bummer about today is this freaking tailgate. I just actually put in some Amazon latches in here. I bought the kit that had the latches and the handle, and I don't know what it is, but like sometimes it'll flop open on its own. Sometimes it won't, and of course, now that I'm trying to do it, it won't. But you obviously saw the tailgate fall off. The only damage we got kind of chipped the corner of the bedside right there, which is a bummer, but whatever. This thing's getting wrapped next week anyway, so at least it won't be quite so visible. There are a few cracks here and there, like this bedside down there, that's had a chip in it since I bought the truck. But other than that, the bedsides are in pretty nice shape, and I want to keep them that way. That's why I didn't burn out until the tires popped, just because like this plastic is so dang brittle. You might have seen LS George's used to be stepside truck, like he did a burnout and the tire blew up and it completely wiped out the whole bedside. So I'm gonna keep these intact for now. The tires, they lasted okay. They're stock 2021 GMC half-ton tires. Yeah, so these are definitely about due to be replaced now. These are on the front of the ugly truck, and we're gonna be throwing on the Pirelli, what are they, 275 45 18s. And in fact, depending on how this works out, I may put those on this truck for LS Fest, just because they have an autocross thing I'm going to do, and that'll definitely be a better autocross tire than the 60 series tires I have on here now. Anyway, that's going to bring this video to an end. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, do me the favor, like, comment, and subscribe. Help this channel reach 100,000 subs. We got more great content coming at you in the very next video you see. I think the next one you'll see. I'm starting the all-wheel drive conversion, and hopefully those 0 to 60 times will come down quite a bit.